Perfect. All right.
Okay, yeah, actually, I do have a question.
All right, what's up?
So the agonist and antagonist, they differ based on gravity.
Yeah, they based on who. So think of the agonist as the one that's generating muscle tension, and the
Hmm.
antagonist is the one that's totally off.
Okay.
So one has to relax in order to allow the other one to move. Like the way it's set up is you have two cables. You have one that's pulling to get this way, and this one needs to yield in order to go that way, and then this one needs to pull back that way. So the
Gotcha.
agonist is the one that's generating tension. The antagonist is the one that's totally off. Which then, if it is, then the agonist, it's the one that's contracting. Then you have to determine if it's a concentric, eccentric, or isometric contraction. So
Okay.
think of agonist as the one that's on, antagonist is the one that's off. Perfect. So let me share my screen again.
Sorry, real quick,
Yep.
just to go off that. So as an example, like during the sit up, the trunk would be, or the like abs would be the agonist, right? For
Correct.
going
And
up
the
and
up and down. If you're laying down, yep,
yeah.
the abdominal muscles would be the agonist on the way up, and they'd also be the same on the way down. Just on the way up, the trunk flexors, the abdominals, they'd be the agonist. They would be contracting concentrically as they're going up, and eccentrically on the way down. But in that case,
And
the
then
trunk extensors never come on. They're in the antagonist the entire time.
awesome. All right.
Yep. Now, I could make them the agonist, but then that would be the situation where I'm exploding back into trunk extension. Then they would switch roles. The abs would try to turn off because they want you to generate as much force as possible. And then so they would be the antagonist, and then the trunk extensors would be but that's very rare, right? Now, if you're in a situation where you're upright and gravity now is in different situations, now you could easily do that. All right, so the first question here, it's asking the name. Oh, this is what I didn't go over, Julia. So now I remember. This is the name and position. You want to know the name and position of all these joints. Now remember that when we look at, besides these axes of rotation, um, all of our movement assessment is based on this thing called anatomical position. And so this is our starting point. This is our reference point, right? So any of these positions here where the hands are out, this is the anatomical position. So when we analyze movement, it's always from what you're seeing here, from the anatomical position. All right. So the definition of ab and abduction is moving away from midline or moving towards midline. So if we have, so this is the midline right through the body there, okay? And her arm is moving from here, starting from anatomical position, her arm would be down at the side, and she's coming up and down here, right? So if I'm moving my limb away from midline, what joint action is that? If I'm taking away, that's abduction, that's taking away. And then if I bring my arm back down, that's adduction because it is moving towards midline, right? So it should be no confusion on that. So she has her arm fully up over her head. And when we ask this here, let's say she started with her arm here and she moved there like that. And visually, that looks like it's moving towards midline, correct? When you're starting here. And you would want to say that movement would be shoulder adduction because you're moving towards midline, right? Which it clearly is. So you can see the arm moving towards midline. The problem is if this was an answer on a test exam, this would actually be shoulder abduction still. And the reason is that anatomical position doesn't have the arms out to the side. The problem is anatomical position is like this right here. It's your hands out to your sides, right? This is your anatomical position, not arm out to the side. And so in order to get from this position here, with your arms down to your side, out to arm to the side, you had to do abduction to begin with. And if all movement is referenced from anatomical position, bringing this position here is just a continuation of the abduction that occurred from there. So if I'm here, this is abduction, abduction, abduction. This is just a continuation of abduction. It doesn't matter if I started here, there, or there. How did I get there in the first place? You have to go back to reference point, anatomical position, and you abducted. That's just a continuation of abduction. Okay, so that was the one key point that I wanted to make sure that I did last time, was making sure that we understood that all movement starts from anatomical position. Okay, so remember I said that flexion is going forward or fetal position, and she's basically curling up into a ball. So what are we seeing? What's happening here at the hip? Does segments get closer together or further apart? So that's hip flexion. Did her trunk move forward or did it move back?
Forward.
It moved forward into flexion. Did her arm move forward or did it move backwards?
Forward.
It moved forward, so that's flexion. Her arms got closer together, so that's flexion. And her knee, it's not locked anymore. The two segments got closer together, that's flexion. So this would be flexion, 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 flexion. And it's asking for the name, so this would be knee flexion, hip flexion, trunk flexion, shoulder flexion, elbow flexion.
So would that be wrong if we were saying like elbow flexor, neck flexor, trunk flexor?
It could be, yeah. And so if there's like, but so now when you're talking about flexors, you're talking about muscles. And in this case, we want to know the joint position. So it's joint flexion. So I would use the word flexion. That's why when I go through and I grade it, if I see like spelling errors, the points go back to you. But
okay.
Yeah, but go back in there and make sure it's flexion. Did you burn through your 2 tries already, or are you just still on your first?
No, it's on my first.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so make sure you're putting flexion in there so flexors are referring to the muscle groups. Flexion is referring to the joint action.
Totally makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
So now in this case, this is where you'd use the flexors or extensors. Let's analyze this. Did we go which way is gravity? Gravity's down, so gravity is helping her into this. So gravity is an assister, not a resistor, right? Gravity is assistance, not resistance in this case. If it's not explicitly said, movements are always done in a controlled manner. And if it says explosively, then you know it's going faster than gravity. But if it's not said, it's going, in this case, it's going with gravity controlled. You see flexion happening here. What muscle did her flexors need to come on to bring her forward? No, gravity was doing that. No problem. Gravity's pulling her down. So she needs something that's going to resist gravity, that's going to slow her down. And if we look at the aspect here, this would be the hip extensors that are trying to pull her back, her trunk extensors that are trying to pull her back, her knee extensors, the hamstrings that are trying to pull her back. And I think I only have you analyze 3, 4, and 5 because the shoulders get a little tricky. So in this case, it would be the trunk extensors, hip extensors, and knee extensors. It would be the opposite because it's the eccentric action that's happening.
But isn't the question asking about her going to this position? Because it's saying...
Yep, so how did she get there? When she went there, did her trunk flexors and her hip flexors remember I had you guys stand up and I had you touch her stomach? Did she need to duck down really fast or did she go down slow and touch her toes?
She probably went down slow.
Yeah, so if you stand up right now and you go down forward, and if you feel the back, if you even just stand up and touch your butt, you will go forward. You'll feel your hip extensors, your glutes, coming on as you go forward. And the same muscle, what I was saying is the same muscles that are controlling you on the way down are the exact same muscles that bring you up. So if this was asking if she went from this position back to anatomical, which muscles would be involved, it would be the exact same answer, but now instead of being eccentric actions, they would be concentric actions.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
But now if the question was, there's someone threw a knife at her head and she needs a duck, then it's going to be flexors. So she probably would squat down too a little bit, but cool. Any questions here? I can't see the chat because I'm sharing my screen, but if you guys have something, just kind of holler out.
I had a question about number 6.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's a Blackboard issue, but I put shoulder abductors and also hip abductors working concentrically. Is that incorrect?
Abduction.
Because I got it incorrect on Blackboard.
What muscle involvement and contraction? So hip abductors and shoulder. Yeah, it should be abductors. So did you put the type of contraction?
Yeah, I put concentric for both.
Okay. Yeah. So shoulder abduction, hip abduction. It should be concentric. It could be a spelling error,
Okay.
but I'll take a look at that and see. Yeah, you're not getting confused with with 5, right? This is the joint action, and so you put shoulder abductors.
Yeah, I got number 5. I think it was 10 out of 10, and then I got number 6 0 out of 10.
Okay,
Which is
yeah,
why I
I'll
was
take a look at it.
confused.
It could just be that's what happens when these get ported into Blackboard. But yeah, I'll take a look and see what's going on with that guy. Did anyone else
Okay.
have that same issue? No. Okay. Okay, number 3. I like number 3 squat because it covers both aspects. One of the things I want to point out is that, all right, so if we're looking at this situation where we're going from standing position anatomical to this bottom position, let's just look at the lower extremity right now. What happened at the hip? Went from what position to what position? Do you hip flexion or hip extension? He went
Hip
from an
flexion.
extended position into hip flexion. From the knee, he went from knee extension to knee flexion. And from the ankle, he went from plantar flexion to dorsiflexion. And we'll come back to the ankle in a second. Gravity's down. So he did hip flexion, knee flexion, ankle dorsiflexion. What muscles were involved here? And if you say hip flexors, knee flexors, and ankle dorsiflexors, that would be the wrong answer. This is a similar situation to the above where gravity is going down. You're starting in a standing position and you're going with gravity. He doesn't need to turn on these muscles because he's not going faster than gravity. He's going slower than gravity. So that means I have an opposite force that's pulling him up. It's the hip extensors, knee extensors, ankle plantar flexors that are working eccentrically. And then gravity is still down. If I'm going from this position to that position, now I'm going up. Now I'm seeing hip extension, knee extension, ankle plantar flexion, and these are all working concentrically. So now it's the exact same hip extensors, knee extensors, and ankle muscles that are working concentrically to overcome gravity. Okay, so the ankle dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. If my hand was my foot, the plantar surface would be the bottom of my foot that touches the ground, the stuff that plants the ground, and the dorsal, like the dorsal fin, would be the back of my hand, the dorsal surface. And so if the definition of flexion are the two segments are getting closer together, and the definition of extension, the two are getting further apart. If I do dorsal flexion, that means the dorsal surface is moving closer to the shin. And if I do plantar flexion, that means the plantar surface got closer to the shin. Now we normally see that with the foot. So here's your tibia. Let's say my hand is my foot. That would be dorsiflexion because the dorsal surface moved closer, and this would be plantar flexion because the plantar surface got closer. Now this can be with the leg stable and the foot moving relative, but we spend a lot of our time with our foot on the ground, and we can't push through the ground. So what we'll see, instead of seeing this as dorsiflexion, we would see this as dorsiflexion. You can see that it didn't matter. In this case, the foot moved relative to the tibia, and in the other aspect, the tibia moved relative to the foot, like in this case, the squat. When you squat down, you're bending your knee, your shin goes forward, you're doing ankle dorsiflexion. And then when you come out of that position, you're doing ankle plantar flexion. You're just not going into that heel raise aspect. So I just wanted to point that out with the ankle dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, that you'll see a lot of that. Instead of the foot moving relative to the tibia, you'll see the tibia moving relative to the foot. So if we go back to this situation here, his knee came forward. So the tibia came forward, so the dorsal surface got closer to the shin. That's dorsiflexion. And then when he goes from this position to that position, the knee went back, And so now he's at a 90-degree angle, and that's plantar flexion. So if you feel overwhelmed when you're trying to worry about capturing 3 joints in a movement, right? 3 joints in a movement, typically, and I would say most of the time, if you look at what's happening with in the gravity situation, in this case, gravity is always down, so you were fine. When you're going from left to right without even looking at the individual joints, you would say that the lower extremity in the trunk is going with gravity, so that you know that everything that you analyze is going to be eccentric. So you don't have to look at the joints individually. You kind of have to look at what their joint action. But if the hip is moving eccentrically, most likely the knee and the ankle are as well. So it's usually global per extremity. Now in this particular case, as he's going down, he's also lifting his arms up. So he's doing a concentric activity of the shoulders and a eccentric activity of the legs, and then just reversing it as it's coming back. But if we look at here, this is gravity. It's affecting all the joints at the same. If we look at this situation, gravity, he's doing the same thing. So all the joints would be doing the same thing.
With his arms moving forward out, is that still abduction, shoulder abduction?
For which one? Question number 3 or question 6?
Question 3.
Okay, so in this case, his arms looked like they went more forward.
Right. Yeah.
So that would be shoulder flexion.
Okay. All right.
And now let's answer this. If that's shoulder flexion, his arms went forward. Gravity is down. Now, in order for him, even though his body went down, his arms did what?
They went up.
They went up. So is that with gravity or overcoming gravity?
That'd be against gravity, so it'd be concentric.
Concentric, perfect. And that would be the shoulder flexors working concentrically. And then when he goes to this position, that would be the same muscles, the shoulder flexors working eccentrically.
Awesome. Thank you.
So in this particular case, we have the lower extremity and the upper extremity doing just different things, even though gravity is straight down. Okay, so what plane of motion are we operating in this exercise?
Frontal
plane. And we have an axis of rotation right here, axis of rotation right there, and we have an axis of rotation right there that we're analyzing. What joints are involved here? We have the trunk and spine, so we have the spine, and we have the shoulder, and we have the shoulder. So that's what we're looking at here. Gravity is still down. So I'm going to the side. This is lateral flexion. And do I have you analyzing this? Do I have you? Let me see what the next question is. No, okay, I kept it easy. Okay, all right, perfect. This can be a complicated aspect. So we're just looking at movement here. So this is lateral flexion to the right. What does she have to do to get her arm up in this position here? From anatomical.
abduction.
Abduction, all the way, even though it's moving towards midline. And in this one here, number 3, she's going cross midline. If she was to come back up and do it from anatomical position, that would be adduction, ADD. So this is trunk lateral flexion. This is shoulder abduction and shoulder adduction, adduction. Now, if we were going to analyze the muscular involvement here, when she side bend to her right, she's going this way. Is she going with gravity or against gravity? She's going with gravity. Gravity is pulling her down. So are these muscles contracting or are those muscles contracting?
Oh.
What's slowing her down from overcoming gravity? These guys would be helping her, so she'd be moving faster, where these guys would be pulling this direction, which would be pulling her in that direction. So this would be eccentric lateral flexion of the lateral trunk flexors, or the left lateral trunk flexors. Okay, so let's analyze this moving from left to right, right? So this is the starting position. Gravity is down again. From anatomical position, what did I have to do to get my arm in this position here and that position there? So this is elbow extension. I didn't have to do much. And this could either be shoulder flexion or shoulder abduction. And I would make it clear on an exam, and it doesn't matter. The muscular responsibility for the same are the same. So doing shoulder flexion or this case, horizontal abduction. But this is sometimes considered abduction. But either way, we'll analyze it from a horizontal abduction or an extension aspect. From here to there, he overcame gravity and he went from arm overhead to arm back down. So if this was if he was in a shoulder flex position to start with, he's going into shoulder extension, and that'd be concentric because he's overcoming gravity. He's going up and gravity's trying to pull him down. Or if you're analyzing it from the frontal plane, this is abduction, he'd be moving into adduction, so the opposite position that he got into. And the elbow is moving from extension to flexion. And this is all concentric activity because he's overcoming gravity. And now if we go from right to left and gravity's down, to go from here to there and from there to there, I went from elbow flexion to elbow extension. Hopefully he just didn't drop and just let gravity take over. He slowed himself down. So he's doing elbow extension, but it's the elbow flexors working eccentrically. And let's say it's extension. He's going from shoulder extension to back to shoulder flexion. That would be the shoulder the shoulder flexors work. I'm sorry, the shoulder extensors working eccentrically.
The example you have on Blackboard, I think it says it's all concentric movement.
Well, it was when we're going from left to right. That was concentric. But when we go from right to left, now it's eccentric. Do I have something on where on Blackboard do I have?
It was under Unit 1 assignment. It's just called KIN 230 Unit 1 assignment example. But it's the chin up and then you say assess the following starting joint position and then
You're talking about the Word document? Oh, okay. So what this is looking at, so this is saying how you got into that position to begin with, right? And this is saying how did you go from left to right? So in order for him to go up into this position, for him to get into this position from anatomical, he had to concentrically keep his elbow extensors, and then he had to abduct his shoulders. And then this second part here is looking at now how we went from left to right. So it was just it's an extra remedial step. So I'm not asking you to figure out how you got there. It's assumed. So, but
right. I was thinking picture 1 when they were asking how he got there. I was thinking from picture 2 to picture 1. Did he?
No. It's from anatomical position to there, and then picture 1 to picture 2, and then So this is just cool. I think that's I think we covered a lot of stuff. I mean, that's really what these first 2 units are. I used to have it where the module 1, 2, and 3 and 4 were all like one big exam. So that was a killer. So that's and just so you guys know too, that's why the syllabus was a little wonky. Is that the syllabus was using the old format. I remember I changed this last fall because of the issue there. So I broke it up a little bit. So this first exam is really just chapter 4, and I kind of highlighted that. And it's going to be really what we just went over, and it's going to be this this muscle control formula. So your examples here, can you go through step by step and identify what's happening? And so this kind of takes you through some of the verbiage and the words, being able to identify the plane of motion that you're moving in, the axis that it's moving about, and then most importantly, the muscle action. And as long as you remember that what goes up, that comes down, most of the time, the same muscle that's working concentrically is going to be the exact same muscle working eccentrically, unless you're like perpendicular to gravity. Gravity's down and you're doing this. And that you could have, when you're going against gravity, it's always concentric. When you're going with gravity, most of the time it's eccentric, but there are occasional situations where you can be moving faster than gravity, and it's So if you wanted like just to memorize something and not have to think about it, and you'll be right most of the time, but you could be wrong occasionally, always just burn into your brain. Well, 100% of the time, if you're overcoming gravity or moving faster than gravity, it's always concentric. Always. Always, 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 always. And the one that is a little tricky, but about 95% of the time, it is, when you're going with gravity, it's eccentric. So if you just memorize that, going with gravity is eccentric, overcoming gravity with concentric, most of the time you're right. There'll be one out of 100 where when you're going with gravity, you could be moving faster than gravity. And that's usually explosive movements where you're trying to like move something really fast going down, right? That's when I had your hands on the stomach and you were trying to crunch forward. Now, after this interaction, and now we know that document's there, do you guys feel a lot better about where things are moving?
Yeah, I feel a lot better. I'm just hearing
Evelyn, you got a lot of static going on.
Yeah, your connections are horrible. I'm going to look at your computer on Thursday. We'll take a look at it and we'll see if what the heck's going on with your...
I don't know how to fix it.
Well, I don't know if I was able to fix my thing. We'll see, though, or not. But are you guys still seeing my screen? Hey, when you guys see my screen, right, are you able to see my face as well too? Like, can you see my video feed? All right, so if I like do gestures and stuff, and I can okay, all right, perfect. So you guys can see that I'm updating the videos. Let's see, how long are they? I think I'm trying to keep them under. Yeah, I'm trying to keep them like under 10 minutes. Some of them are longer than others, but I'm keeping the old videos here as well because these are long. These are like 30 or 40 minutes. This one's a little long, but I don't know if you can tell, but this is one of my very first screencasts, and you can see that they're changing. Right, I'm putting more things in there, and these are my hacked photos. So again, don't turn me in. But then I post some images here. This is the format I'm going to continue with. I'm going to update these videos. I'm going to have these like these terminology like lecture 2.2, 2.1. What I'll do too is I'll post these videos and I'll post like things that are coming from other websites. I love this crash course video series. If you're taking anatomy or bio and you want to like have a little bit of more interaction, these are like, I find this guy kind of entertaining. He's kind of dorky, but they're pretty good videos. And so I have them here. These are not required. I don't want to overwhelm you with information, but if you want more stuff, I've kind of already curated it for you so you don't have to go around and searching. So this guy's pretty good. He's entertaining. This other guy, Professor Dave, he's dry. He's got like corny, but this is like even more basic. So if you need to slow down a little bit to go through some of these things, although I think I said this is the hardest exam in the chapter because it's more going from like 3D space using terminology. The content will get a little harder, but the content's going to be more cohesive and it's more as matter of fact. It's like right in your face. You don't have to like look at something and try to figure something out. So if the terminology gets a little too much for you, then you can always go through some of these videos and get a little backed up. And I think these are relatively short too. These are like 10-minute videos. So you're looking at like a total of maybe an hour worth of video watching, which I know some of my students have said that they sometimes put the videos on in the background and they can do it like a podcast and you can kind of float through that way. However you want to do it, I think it's good. But again, like you'll see these extra folders here. And what I'm going to have built out here are anything that you see lecture that says lecture 2.1, 2.2. Those are the go-to and make sure you consume those.
Okay, and then to be clear, module 0 through 2 is just the exam, right?
Yeah. Okay. What you see here, like anything that's in front of the exam here, this is going to be module 1 and 2. And then you'll take the exam this weekend and then we'll start module 3 and 4. And then we have these combined together. So yeah, anything that preceded that folder. When you take unit 2, it's only going to be these 2 modules. So it's not, the only thing that's comprehensive is the final.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to launch it tomorrow, actually, between the 17th and the 22nd. Yeah. So today is what? Wednesday, Thursday. I'm going to make it live on Thursday. So you'll have, all right, so for the exam, it's fully online. You'll have, I think you'll have like 40 questions, and they're selected from a pool of 50. So you'll get randomly selected questions. And it's going to be live starting tomorrow, and it's going to close on the 22nd, so like midnight. So you have all day Thursday, all day Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday to take it. Now, it doesn't mean you have the whole entire time to take it. That's your option to start the exam. Once you click yes and you start the exam, your timer starts and you have, I think I gave you 40 or 50 minutes. I think I gave you a little more, 55 minutes for this exam. Whatever it is, whatever the time is, that's when the timer starts. You can enter and exit as many times as you want. So if you have a browser issue or internet issue, don't worry, you can just log back in right away. You'll get all of your questions all at once, but don't think that when you stop out of the exam, your timer stops. It starts. And once it starts, it keeps on going. So if you start your exam tomorrow, the 17th at 1 o'clock, you have 45 minutes to do it. If you wait until the 22nd, you have 45 minutes to do it, right? So just, you can start it within that range, but once you start, the timer goes. I'm not using Respondus Lockdown Browser or Monitor yet, but we might put that in there. But for now, it's just take the exam. You are on a time limit, so prepare for the exam as if it's not open book, open notes, but you will have the opportunity to have your books in open notes, but you do not have enough time to look up every question. And so I've had students in the past think, oh, I'm just going to have all my things there. They fail miserably because their questions are, so the way I have it set up is like, you should be able to get like 90% on your own, and then maybe 3 or 4 questions you'll have to look up on your own, but don't think you're going to look up every single question. You're going to run out of time. You have about a minute per question to answer. And they're usually multi-part, where you're analyzing a movement. So and so is doing a squat. What's happening at this joint, this joint, this joint. And so you're not looking things up. You're just trying to figure things out. Okay?
Is there going to be math involved?
No math. No. Unless you're just trying to count down your time, how much time you have left, but that's on your end. So any other questions?
Is it multiple choice?
Yeah, all multiple choice.